Ray, thank you for. I think I got cut off there, but the start of that was hello, everybody. And thank you for tuning in. I am Kevin Tomlinson. If you don't already know, this is experimental, so bear with me. I'm figuring some things out here, but one of the things I'm looking forward to in the future is I plan to do this every Friday for now. That seems to be the best schedule for this. I plan to do one of these every Friday at 10 o'clock Central. So hope that you enjoy what's coming up. This time around, I'm talking about how that time that I wrote a book in one day, a 60,000 word novel in one day. So I'm looking forward to diving into that. A little bit of, we'll call it housekeeping. I am, like I said, going to do one of these each week. This is part of something I'm building called the Something Else Show. It was called the Something Else Podcast, but I decided, it needs to be bigger than that. I think it can be more than just a podcast. So for those of you tuning in live, you're going to get to ask some questions. You can ask me anything you want. Mostly going to be talking about how I wrote a book in one day. And I'm happy to answer questions about writing process, craft, marketing, whatever you think is important. If you're one of my readers and you're tuning in, this is a chance to see kind of behind the scenes of how I write my stuff, my fiction. But I've got a real love for the indie author crowd, and this is also a big part of me kind of trying to give back there. So anyway, ask whatever questions you like in the comments, and I'll take it on. If you're listening to this later on a podcast or watching it on YouTube after the fact, go ahead and ask questions anyway. Pop in and ask me whatever you want, and I'll try to make sure I answer that. Okay, I'm already seeing some folks lining up. Hello, Allison. Thank you for tuning in. I'm glad to see you. Ray, as always. Man, Ray, you are always there. You're like my ever faithful companion. And you go to Ernie's shows and stuff too. So you're a busy guy. All right. So to just get started, I several years ago, and I don't remember exactly when, but several years ago, I was in Manhattan with my family, some of whom I think may actually be watching right now. But there was a point in there. So we were there for Thanksgiving, and we were there for over the course of like a week, maybe a little longer than a week. And we had lots of time with each other and a little bit of time apart, which was something I actually was kind of looking forward to. But on one of the days when Kara and her family were out exploring and doing something, I was kind of stuck at the hotel. It got all snowy and nasty, and I did not feel like getting out. I felt like doing a little bit of writing, actually. And at that time, I was producing a book just about every month. Pretty much every month at that point. I was knocking them out with what I call my 30-day author formula, which I'll talk about a little bit. But I am one who has always tried to push the line, reset my boundaries a little as a writer. And so there was that moment in there where I was kind of stuck, had nowhere to go, nothing else to do, and decided, you know what, I'll use this time. I'll use this time. At that point in my life, I was getting up around 4 a.m. every day. I don't do that as much these days. Sometimes I do, but for a good solid couple of years there, I was up at 4 a.m. no matter what time zone I was in. And so I was up at 4 a.m., not a lot to do anywhere, even in Manhattan. Well, actually, let me take that back. I'm sure Manhattan has plenty for you to do at 4 a.m. But on a snowy near Thanksgiving day, I wasn't really up for much of what the city had to offer. So I kind of cut a deal with the hotel, the staff, the wait staff of the like cafe area, bar area of the hotel. I cut a deal with them that if they would just kind of keep me supplied with coffee and bring me a sandwich every now and then, I would pay for everything. I would tip generously, but just kind of keep an eye on the laptop when I go to pee, that kind of thing. And they were actually more than happy to do it. Now, over the course of that day, I think they changed personnel at least twice that I'm aware of. But at 4 in the morning, wasn't a lot of people there, and I kind of had to, recut that deal a couple of times. But they were more than happy to help me, and so I sat down and did what I do. I am not I don't outline, so I didn't need to worry about outlining the story. I had an idea. I had a title, which is something I've said before. I always start with a title. All but like 2 of my books out of like 60 books, all but 2 started with the title first. And of the 2 that didn't, one had a title when it started, but I changed it for something I thought was better. And the other, if I remember right, was kind of just a mishmash of pieces that I kind of pulled together from disparate things that I'd been writing, and just eventually crammed those together into a book. And so it didn't have a title when it started, but this one did. It had the title of Evergreen. And if you haven't had an opportunity to check that book out, I meant to actually type this up before I started, but let's go ahead, and I'm going to write the URL. It's books2read.com/evergreen. And and I'll pop that up on the screen so you can see it. So if you go, you can kind of see the cover and everything. If you're willing, you can go ahead and pop and buy the book. I would appreciate that. That supports me. Thank you. But this is what happened. I sat down with an idea, and the idea was, what would it be like? So I've always been obsessed with the idea of being able to just absorb knowledge, right? And it started. I always wanted that osmosis power to just sort of lay hands upon a book and absorb everything that was in that book. But I didn't want to make this about somebody who could do that per se. Maybe later in a sequel or something, I'll come up with a secondary character who can do that. But I thought, well, what would it be? What would your life be like if you every time you touched someone, made skin-to-skin contact with someone, you suddenly knew everything they were thinking, and suddenly knew all their memories, maybe had all their skills? What would it be like? No harm to them. You're not damaging them. There's nothing happening to them at all. You just copy their, well, later I refer to it as memory engrams, but you copy that into yourself, and you have this person's personality and everything in your head. And I thought, well, there would be all kinds of issues with that, right? It would be challenging for you, because now you've got some other personality and someone else's memories in your head. That has to lead to some issues. So, and it did. I decided, well, that's a conflict, and so I made that part of the conflict of the character. And I thought, well, how long should this last? And so I came up with a set of rules. And in fiction, we refer to that as world building, creating a magic system, things like that. This character, I wanted there to be a basis in science in this, and I expanded on that quite a bit, I think. And so I think I did hit that note where there is some scientific, maybe it's pseudoscience, but there is some scientific backing to how this guy's powers work. And so I made these rules, and the rules were, it had to be skin-to-skin contact. The effect would last no more than 30 minutes. And then everything would fade. Even you would have a memory of having the memory, but you would not be able to access the data that person had in their head, the skills that they had. But while that 30 minutes was happening, you had all those abilities. If they were a talented pianist, you could play. You could be a virtuoso yourself. If they could juggle, you could juggle. If they knew all the codes to get into this top secret computer, then you had that ability. And I say you, the character, the protagonist, whose name was, I'm apparently very fond of the name Roland, but I spelled it a little different than usual. But anyway, because I've used that name in like 10 different stories and books. And Roland Denzel is the name of the FBI agent in my Dan Collar thrillers. And I now have in my life a very good friend, Roland Denzel, who, I just these days just say, yeah, I named him for that guy. I didn't know him at the time that I wrote the like first 3 books, but maybe I heard his name somewhere. I don't know. Anyway, the character. So the limitations on this were, skin to skin contact, 30 minutes of holding on to that memory. But then there were side effects. So one of those was that person's personality comes in like a disembodied entity within the character's mind. And they are, of course, confused and alarmed by what's happened to them. And so the characters had to develop ways to essentially distract those I was going to say hijackers, hitchhikers. That's the word I was looking for. Distract them, encapsulate them into a kind of mental virtual cell of sorts. The person that he's absorbed these memories from, by the way, never has any clue that any of this has happened. They don't feel anything. They don't know anything. They don't remember anything from the experience. There's no like mind to mind contact. It's all happening on the character's side, the Roland character. The other limitations were the more frequently he came into contact with somebody, the more likely it would be that engram would become permanent. So he had to be very careful how often he touched someone. And as a consequence of that, he actually has a number of personalities that are in his head that were permanent touches. Now there's another caveat here, but I'll get to that in a second. But so he has these personalities who like to weigh in on things and like to give their side of things. And because they're permanent, they're a little harder to contain. And one of those was the love interest, the girl that he's in love with. Having had plenty of skin-to-skin contact with her over the years, that was sort of how he first accidentally discovered that these engrams could become permanent. Another is he's a scientist, a researcher who is basically trying to exploit the protagonist and these abilities, learn how they work, maybe replicate them. And so he purposefully had himself permanently put into Roland's head. But then there are others, and the others are where things kind of get a little strange. So this scientist, who his name is Henry, who was manipulating him, wanted to test the limits of this ability. And so one of the things that was discovered was if Roland touched someone who was recently dead, like within a few seconds or moments of that person's death, he would permanently absorb their memories instantly, without, even if they've never touched them before. It's almost like, that person's mind was looking for an escape route and he happened to be one. So that was something he had to avoid. And so Henry has tricked him several times into doing something like that, touching someone with schizophrenia, little things like that. So there's this cast of characters in Roland's head that talk to him, guide him, help him, sometimes work against him, sometimes don't like him much, but their skills can sometimes come in very handy. One of the people he made contact with was skilled in Krav Maga, which is a Israeli martial arts, and so he can kind of kick butt when she's willing. She'll kind of kick in, take over, and take out the bad guys on his behalf, using his body, and that comes in handy every now and then. So that's the whole premise, and that sort of thing had been kind of percolating in my head for a while. So I will say, if there's any pre-work that was done, that was it, and it was mostly just me imagining this idea, the asking what if someone had an ability like this, how would it work, what are the limits, what's the complication of it. And over time I'd kind of just had it's like I had a fantasy about it, it was like, just kind of kept thinking like, oh, that'd be cool, oh, that'd be neat. But I did no pre-writing, no outlining. The name Evergreen was one that came to me from there's a song that just had that as one of the lyrics, and for some reason it stuck with me, and I wanted to use it for something. And at first I thought, well, it's I don't know what I had planned, but I thought, well, it's just an interesting word if you can apply it to something out of context, and it also has connotations for this kind of, if you're talking about someone's memories, what's long lasting, what isn't, what sticks around, and the characters. I give a different explanation in the book as to why the character became known. His street name or code name became Evergreen, but my thinking on it was, okay, let me back up. The reason he was named Evergreen, Henry had named him that because the backstory was that whenever he does the scan, he gets that chart, and it's a bunch of spiky lines. Well, the ink in that machine was green, and whenever Roland would absorb someone, it would basically look like a whole forest of trees because it was so dense. And so he gave him the name Evergreen as a kind of inside joke. But I had in the back of my mind the idea that these engrams that he absorbed that became permanent, those were evergreen memories. And so the story is sort of, the subtext of the whole story is sort of about the Roland character, the Evergreen character, learning how to coexist with these permanent memories and permanent personalities that are in his mind. That's the gist of the story. Okay. The mechanics of the whole thing was, here I am in Manhattan, nothing to do, but plenty of coffee and plenty of sandwiches and plenty of people watching my laptop for me if I needed to get up and go do anything. And I'm a fast writer as it is. And at that time, I really was doing, I was pushing myself and doing around 5,000 words in a we'll say an hour and a half to 2 hour period. Not necessarily 5,000 per hour. That, although I've done that in extreme situations, but I'm a very fast typist. I type about the rate I think, and maybe even a little faster than I think. And so I just started telling the story. And the easiest thing for me at that point, something I've always considered it kind of a cheat, actually, but I always thought this will give you some insight into my psychology. I always thought first person stories were cheating. That was something I always, for some reason, I latched onto that. It just seemed like it was too easy. I can tell a story in first person way easier because it's, I'm just assuming a role and spitting it out. But that was, and that was part of why I chose to do that book in first person, was because, well, if I'm going to do a book in one day, then maybe I'll give myself some advantages. And that was one of the advantages. So that's what I did. I wrote Evergreen in first person to help speed it up. That was the whole idea. And because of that, I was doing well over, every 2 hours, I was probably doing closer to like 7,000 or 8,000 words per minute because of that. That's my theory. So that meant I was getting through a rough draft pretty quickly when my goal was, actually, I'll be honest with you, my goal at that point, that day, was 50,000 words. And what I ended up writing was 60. The 50,000 words came from NaNoWriMo. Actually, it did come from NaNoWriMo, but it came from Chris Beatty's book, No Plot, No Problem. I had read that a few years earlier. And in that, he talks about the origins of NaNoWriMo, which, if you're not familiar with what that is, that's National Novel Writing Month every November. And the goal of that is to write a book in 30 days, write a book in the month of November. And he gave his whole process, a process I have adopted and adapted and made my own in my whole 30-day author formula. And so my goal was, okay, the minimum for NaNoWriMo for a book is 50,000 words. I will aim for 50,000 words in one day. What I ended up doing was writing 60,000 words. And over the course of about, I'm going to say it was like 18 hours. It's really hard for me to pin down exactly how much time it was. There was a good 18-hour period there from say 4 in the morning to 18 hours later. Kevin not do math good, but the whole drive of it was just keep writing, keep plugging, keep pushing. What I think happened, what I have decided has happened since then, because it was exhausting, knocking that out, and it was a nonstop thing with very few breaks. Okay, mostly I'd pick up a cup of coffee, sip, go right into a burst of text, and and just kept pushing. But the whole thing, the whole like magic of it for me was, it was like I was tapping into a different part of my brain. Um, Part of it I think was because of doing the first person stuff. Because now I'm, like I said, I'm assuming the role of this character. And then I had all these other characters who, in the course of one of my normal regularly written novels, I'll have the protagonist communicate with all kinds of characters. There'll be all kinds of things happening, but it's always verbal. You don't get their thoughts, right? If you see their thoughts, it's because I'm jumping into my limited omniscient hat and telling you what they're thinking. But in this case, the protagonist literally knew the thoughts of everyone that was important to him and anyone he came into physical contact with. And so I was exploring, like, what's the unfiltered version of communication now I gave these characters, the inner voices, the ability to lie. I mean, they could still withhold things, but it was almost voluntary, whether or not Roland, the protagonist, accepted the lie or dove deeper to discover whether it was a lie. It was sort of a decision he made to respect their privacy, even if it was working against him. But I think ultimately one of the unspoken rules here was actually that if he chose to, he could just bring out everything he wanted. Maybe I've been kicking around the idea of writing a sequel to that book, and there's ideas that I want to explore, and that may be one of them. No spoilers, just that's kind of it's sort of like what happens next, right? And by the way, if you are watching, thank you. And please, no matter where you're watching, make sure you like, follow, and subscribe. I am legally required by the internets to ask you to do that. So thank you. And I do see that there's some questions, and I am going to get to them. So give me a moment and we will swing back around. Okay. Yes, I'm seeing some great questions and comments. So thank you for all that. I'm tagging them all so I can pop in and check them out here in a moment. Okay. So I'm knocking this thing out. I'm accessing, I think, this other part of my brain. And it just flows. So there's a idea, there's a concept in writing and in all art, of flow. Not just art, but all kinds of aspects of our culture. But the idea of flow is you enter the state of flow. The idea in general is that you kind of do access some other part of your mind, almost as if your subconscious takes over and starts just doing. You lose track of time. Your energy goes up. You might forget to eat. All these things happen, and you may have experienced this in doing something, especially when you're doing something you truly love to do, like a hobby or some passion project. You may lose track of time, right? Well, that's that state of flow, and that's what happened. Is I would go through spurts of this state of flow that were like an hour or 2, 3 hours long, because I was staying focused on it, right? And I was just in it, and so that's really what dredged that book out. To be frank about it, like I'm a what's known as a pantser. I don't outline my books. So I actually, when something like this happens, like I'm not writing to some outline. I'm just letting the story unfold naturally, which is something people refer to that as discovery writing. Pantsing is the other term you hear in my world a lot. Discovery writing is something that even like Stephen King, that he does the same thing. So there are a lot of authors who don't outline it in advance. I'm one of them. And they just let the story unfold as it unfolds. And the reality here is the book you get at the end, and this book is in that same category, may not be ready to go, right? And mine was not. I had to come back and do some edits and rewrites later to make that book ready for prime time. But that's the old adage of, writing is rewriting, right? So that's what I ended up doing. But the first draft of that book ended up being around 60,000 words long. I did not know the story when I started. I was surprised by the story when it was finished, and just really enjoyed that process, except for the part that it was so grueling. It was almost like voluntarily putting myself through torture. But the end result was a book that honestly was one of my most popular books for a very long time. I think people read it and really enjoy that story. And I think once they find out the origin of it, it's even more enjoyable. Like, it's just like a mystery that's happened. So, but anyway, that is the gist of how it happened. I can tell you straight up, I am never doing it again. I'm never going to. Maybe one day I will attempt it again. But the whole point was for me to stretch myself, push myself, and I've done that. I've done that throughout my career. So when I first started writing, it took me like 2 years to write my first book, and then 2 years to write the sequel, and 2 years to write the third one. And it was that was just an insanely long pace. And if I was going to do this, I wanted to step it up. And so I developed what I called my 30-day author process, which was really sit down, put your butt in a chair, and commit to writing X number of words per day so that you can get X number of words at the end of X period of time. And so if I want to write a book in 30 days and that book's going to be 60,000 words long, most of my books are like 80,000 words long these days. But if the book's going to be 50 to 60,000 words long, that means I need to sit down and write 1,500 to 1,700 words every single day for 30 days. And I will knock it out. If I want to do more, I got to increase the word count per day, or I got to increase the time. It's basic math. And once I started kind of applying that formula, it became a discipline and a habit. And then I was able to write those books in 30 days. And then I thought, well, can I do it in 15 days? Because if I could get one done in half a month, that gives me the rest of the month to edit and get it ready. And yeah, you can. And I did. And I think a lot of authors can do this. And it's just, like I said, it's about scaling up and down with the number of words you produce every day to hit a target. And so having done it in 15 days, I thought, well, can I do it in a week? A standard 5-day week or 7 days. I could do 7 days, but I'm like, let's try for 5 days. And so I wrote, a book in 5 days. And it was tough. It was a lot of, back then I wasn't working with anyone else. These days I do the work with Drafted Digital, and that's been very gratifying, but it's also changed my targets a little out of necessity. And so, also changes the amount of energy that I'm willing to put into certain tasks. But I did that, and I did it in a week. And so that's the mindset I was in when I got to Manhattan, and was already kicking around the idea of doing a book in a day. Could I do it? Could I do it? And so I had the opportunity. When you have an opportunity and you have an inspiration, you really need to go for that. And this is life advice as much as it is advice for the indie author crowd. But opportunity and inspiration are rare, and you should look for them everywhere. But when you get both together, you definitely should act, because that means something magical is about to happen. And something did. Now, like I said, not going to do it again. Nothing I'm excited about trying again. But I do think it was worthwhile, because what it did was reset my limits. as a writer. It reset within my own mind what I'm capable of doing, and that is worth every second of that whole experience. And the pushing and the trying, trying to beat it and that sort of thing. That's absolutely worth all the energy and effort that went into it. So that's it. So Jalen Rowland, yes, that's the character's name. I sometimes forget. I have so many characters. So I'm seeing a lot of questions and comments. So I'm going to start answering these and posting these, and that's what we'll spend some time on. Feel free to ask me anything. I'm here, and let's see. Let me pop back in comments. Okay. My good friend, Dr. Andy Jones, says, if you can write a book in a day, Mr. Tomlinson, are people ever disappointed that you've only published only 70 books? Also, don't you have a book coming out later this month? I'm getting to that one, Andy. I've got a little promo I'm going to show a little later for the current book. But yes, I have a new book coming out at the end of the month. It's actually a novella length, or probably more of a short story length. And it's one that I had included in the Turning Tides collection, that where the revenue, all the proceeds went to help various charities and the people in Ukraine. But now it's out of that, and I'm releasing that as a standalone little Dan Kotler story, and I'm really excited about it. I'll tell you more about that later. But no one's ever expressed to me that they were disappointed that I only have 70 books. I've expressed that to me because I like the writing process, and I do write very rapidly. I've kind of toned down a little over the past few years because I'm trying to give myself kind of a chance to, I guess, re-energize. Or it's like if you were a farmer, you would sometimes let a field lie fallow for a season so that you can come back later and plant sorghum or something. That's what I'm kind of trying to do. I don't want to burn myself out, but I do enjoy writing. I write every single day, every day. And I sometimes what I'm writing is, I churn out books still, not as many as I used to, but I'm also doing a lot of other writing and articles and short stories and blog posts and things like that I wasn't doing at the time that I was knocking out a book in 15 days or a month or whatever. So no one's expressed any disappointment yet. Fingers crossed. So, Allison S., how are you settling into your home, and are you missing life in the RV? We love this house. This house has been amazing. You may actually hear next door, the final house on the street is being built. They did the foundation yesterday, so they're out there banging around. I'm not sure if you hear that or not, but we have this. The house is beautiful. We got a beautiful view. Lots of we're in the Texas Hill Country. We've got lots of cool stuff to look at here. Lots of cool stuff to do here. So it's been great, and it's been a chance to take a breath, And I've been enjoying having my office back. I probably spend 90% of my life in this room right now when I'm not at conferences or eating. No, actually, I eat a lot of meals up here too. Kara and I do see each other. We do spend time together. So, but I will admit, I kind of miss van life. Every now and then I watch something on YouTube of, somebody who's out doing the stuff that we were doing for 2 years. Actually, all told, we did the whole full-time RV and van life thing for like 4 years. We had a couple of gap years in between. But yeah, I do. I miss it. Think about it. I've been thinking about maybe next year using the whole conference circuit. I may arrange to do that as a van life trip again, but maybe not. It just depends. It's there's a lot of factors, but we're definitely taking a road trip for my birthday after I'm back from NINC in Tampa, the writers conference, big writers conference that we tend to go to every September. It ends right around the time my birthday begins. I've taken set aside some time so that we can take a little road trip. So we're going to try it again. Joe asks, how many words per minute do you type? So that kind of varies depending on level of intensity, but my average is like between 100 to 120. Sometimes slower, just depends on, these hands have typed a lot of things over the past. I'm going to be 50 years old in October, so 50 years of wear and tear. My hands aren't as limber as they used to be. Actually, I probably need to not do that. I'm a big believer in proclaiming and manifesting stuff. So, my hands are young and spry. But there are some days when maybe I'm only doing like 90 words per minute or something. That it really depends. If I used to sit down and do those typing tests where they'll time you out and you got to beat your old score and things like that. And I used to just burn those up. But it seems strange to me that I used to type. I felt like I typed faster and easier on that big clunky mechanical IBM Selectric typewriter that I learned to type on. I was the champion with that when I was taking typing classes in high school. Probably the best skill I took from high school, honestly. But yeah, usually anywhere from 100 to 120. That's my usual typing speed. Sometimes a lot faster when I'm really focused. I've never actually tracked it, to be honest, but I guess if I did the math backwards from the output, I could probably figure it out. But like in general, I'm doing like 2,000 words an hour most days, whatever that works out to, and that may be less than 100 words per minute. But 2,000 words an hour also includes me stopping to go do quick research on Google and things like that. So if I'm just straight up typing, it gets pretty fast. Robin says, my hands hurt just listening to that pace. Well done for maintaining it. Yeah, my hands hurt too sometimes, Robin. But, actually, here's a phenomenon. This is an interesting phenomenon. When you get into that zone, when you get into the flow, a lot of times the aches and pains and the limitations just disappear. They just go out of your head. You don't even feel it anymore. So yeah, that happens to me a lot. So, I kind of joke about my hands aching or whatever, but they're not really that bad. They're actually pretty good. And I actually always had more issues with using a pencil or a pen for long periods than I had with typing. So, my good friend Carrie, my brother, curious, out of all that, what was the percentage of rewriting, having to go back and redo what you did? I'd say I don't know a percentage per se. I will say that there isn't a word in that book that wasn't touched in some way during rewrites. I didn't rewrite the whole book or anything. I didn't rewrite every sentence or anything like that. But there was a lot of the consideration and the hesitation and stuff that would normally go into the book while I'm writing happened in the rewrite. And so, that phrasing isn't quite hitting the mark. So I'm going to rephrase that, or that, this scene would be better if it happened earlier. There was a lot of that kind of stuff that happened with the rewrite and the edit. And I think the book was much stronger because of it. I think the earliest edition that I released of that was not edited quite as well as it should have been. So that, I came back and redid that a couple of years ago with a new edition. But ultimately, when it comes down to it, like the first draft is your foundation. And from that, you can put up as many sticks and bricks as you want and make it look, like whatever house you need it to be. But you should, if writing is something that you're planning to do, you should definitely be prepared to edit and rewrite. Your edit won't be the last edit that book should get. But you should be prepared to go back through that. But that was something I hated and avoided for so long, but it has definitely made all the difference. And now it's something I absolutely love. Like I always rolled my eyes when authors would say this in articles or interviews, but some authors would say, I would love the editing portion. Like they hate writing, but love having written. That's the saying, right? And that they would talk about how much they loved editing and I just couldn't stand editing at the time. But now I love it. I mean, now because you're shaping, you've brought the lump of clay and put it in the basic shape, but now you're going and getting in there and doing the finer details. And one of the things that I do a lot is, toward the end of the book, I'll have ideas for something that I know should have been set up at the beginning of the book. So I go ahead and write that scene. And then when I go and do the rewrites and edits, I set all that up in the beginning. So it makes me look like a genius, right? So like I was just, on point the whole time. But the reality is I knew how it was going to end. So I set it up from when I bounced back to the beginning. Chris asks, did you always write as a pantser or did you plot in your earlier books? Some of my earlier stuff, the book that I had a traditional contract for, I plotted, and I did a whole outline and a treatment and everything. The first book I self-published, I didn't outline, but I did write a treatment, which was sort of the not specific to that book, but specific to a series, because that book was Citadel First Colony was that book, science fiction. I was working with my brother-in-law and my good friend Bob, and the three of us all have kind of our various backgrounds in TV, things like that. And so we were at this time we were planning a web series before there was anything remotely like a web series. There was no Hulu. Streaming was not yet much of a thing. There was YouTube, and I think Vimeo or something, if that. And so we were going to create a sci-fi series that was Lost meets Battlestar Galactica was the premise. It was kind of our log line. And we started developing it and talking about it, getting excited about it. And then I had this realization that I could not get a grip on the story in full. And so what I did was write a treatment that was supposed to be a long format version of what the whole story was going to be about. The whole series was going to be about. And that treatment ended up turning into the first novel. And I published it. And at the time I did something that later I really regretted. And these days I'm really grateful for, but I put the words book 1 of 3 on the cover. And that forced me to have to write 2 more books over the next 4 or 5 years, which just was torture for me because I was working as a copywriter for marketing, and it was just not, I was not putting in the kind of time I put in now. I did not have the discipline. But eventually I got it. I figured it out. And that's actually when I came up with the whole 30-day author formula thing. But the answer to your question is, I've plotted maybe 2 or 3 of my books in my life. And generally those are the ones that I think don't turn out as well. Mostly because if I plot a book, I feel like, well, I've told the story, it's over. And when I'm pantsing a book, the not knowing how it's going to end is the thing that keeps me writing, because I'm discovering the story as I go. So that all that energy goes into finishing the book. If I put all that energy into finishing an outline, I get that sense of completion, and I don't feel like writing the book. It makes it much harder. That's my take. So, Ray asks, do you use speech to text type dictation when writing novels, or maybe only use it for notes on the fly? I just can't get into dictation. I've tried it a couple of times, and it feels so awkward and weird that I haven't mastered that yet. And I think so. Like Nick Thacker is using dictation, and he is just doing an insane amount of work. And so it is something I am interested in, that I think I should master, because I think I could, as weird as this sounds, I think I could maybe double or possibly even triple the number of books I write, if I do that. It's just always been so awkward to me. The whole, like, having to read, or speak the punctuation, for example, and then when you go back to, I've tried this a couple of times. I probably did it all wrong. I'm probably not doing this correctly, but the software I was using was like a transcription software, and so it gets a lot of words wrong. And so I spend more time editing than I would prefer, and instead, and it's not, I can't ever get into a flow because I'm constantly stopping to correct, like, oh, it used this word, oh, it thought I said that word. But I have considered doing that and then paying somebody to clean up the transcription so that I can go back and edit. I have considered doing that, which is something I do at Draft to Digital. I do that with our podcast transcriptions. I have a copy editor who's amazing, and I pay her to fix those transcriptions and edit those. And then also I have her do blog posts and things like that. So I've something that's on my radar, Ray. So maybe I may jump into doing that at some point. Allison asks or says, Jalen is such an intriguing and sometimes complex character. Jalen Rowland is the name of the character in Evergreen. Jalen deals with some moral dilemmas, and I quickly developed an affinity for the characters in his head, which I think is interesting. Like, if you think about it, it's like so meta. There's characters in this character's head that are essentially imaginary. So an imaginary character with imaginary friends, and you can relate to the imaginary friends, which is just, hopefully means, hopefully that's a good sign. I mean, I hope that's good storytelling, Okay, another one from Ray. Yes, Evergreen needs a sequel, though I doubt it should be stretched to a series. That's actually a fair point, Ray. I mean, because I've thought about, like, how would I make this an ongoing series? And maybe that isn't the way to go. This is the kind of thing I'm starting to kind of realize as my author career continues on, is that, not everything has to be a series. Not everything has to be the same genre or the same, sometimes a story is just, it's just going to be what it is, and it's going to stand by itself, or it's going to maybe get a sequel or whatever. And I have to come to grips with that, because my instinct is always like, expand on it, go further. And I even thought about, like, how could I bring Evergreen into my historic crimes universe? And I don't think that's necessarily the right idea. So, and that may be why I haven't written the sequel yet, because if I'm not, maybe there's a voice inside of me that says, no, you're doing this wrong. Don't do the series. Don't do the historic crimes thing. Make this its own thing. So that's actually probably good advice, right? So Wilma McKenzie says, Kevin, when are you going to do an interview with your characters, and how did you come up with that idea? And yes, okay. And so I did a couple of these, and I probably should do more. I did one for Dan Kotler, and I did one for Roland Denzel. And these were things like I was trying to blog more frequently at the time, and I've kind of let that slide. But I was doing a lot of conferences, and so I wanted something that was going to be interesting to the readers, but quick and easy for me to do. And so they did these very short interviews, which some people complained that they were too short and not in depth enough. So maybe I just need to at some point go back and expand on those. But yeah, the idea, I don't know, it kind of came to me as like, what if I were to run into Dan Kotler at this hotel, and had the opportunity to chat with my character, what would he have to say? What is his take on his life? And so, I did a whole Q&A with these characters. I need to do one with Alex Kane. I think she would have a very interesting perspective that people would probably dig. But yes, I need to do that, because those did well, and people really enjoyed it. I enjoyed it. It was a fun exercise. If you're an author, I actually recommend doing something like this, because it's the kind of thing that if you have, your readers and fans will really enjoy getting to know that character on a deeper level, and it may actually attract new readers. But yeah, so I really enjoyed it. I'm going to do more of that. I will do more of that. And Chris asks, do you have an ending in mind when you start a book? I typically I don't actually. Every now and then I'll have a book that I know how that's going to end and I'm writing to that ending. But it's always very general because, as I said earlier, like if I put too much energy into finishing the outline or finishing, having the finished story in some way, then I lose interest in the story, and it makes it much more challenging for me to write it. Knowing how it's going to turn out makes it less appealing to me. So sometimes I'll know just a general idea. Demon Core, I knew in general how that was going to end. And I've taken a lot of flack over that book. So people claimed it had too much psychology, which I find just fascinating because the whole point of that exploration was the psychology of that particular bad guy. and I wanted to humanize him and give him a better motive than, just the revenge motive or whatever. I wanted to give him some background and some life, and in doing that, apparently bored certain readers. So, all right, note taken. I will keep that in mind next time. But I did sort of know how that one was going to end. I have plans for that character later. A couple of people actually complained that they felt like there wasn't enough of a resolution because he, no spoilers, but there's things that happen in that book that I do understand where that no resolution complaint comes from. But I've got plans for later. So we'll see. That's just, it's hard to, can't please everybody. Half the time I can't please anybody. So anyway, all right. Well, so that seems to be all the questions and comments. You feel free to ask me anything else you want. But if I don't get to it before I wrap up, and I'm about to wrap up actually. So anyway, I really appreciate everyone tuning in. I hope that this was fun. I'm going to do more of these. So I'm doing, I shifted the name of it, like I said, from Something Else Podcast to the Something Else Show. Kevin Tomlinson wants to talk about something else, and I will be talking a lot about publishing, writing, and that sort of thing. But I'm also going to, on this show, occasionally we'll have guests. I've pre-recorded something that I need to stream, and I will do that soon because the two guests were amazing and very instrumental in helping me figure out that I wanted to do this show. It's been a while since I've had a podcast or anything of my own. Purely on my own again. So I'm going to be doing more of this in the future. So if you're interested, make sure that you like, follow, and subscribe on wherever you're checking this out. And this will be an audio podcast. I've already got some things set up. And I need to just start building episodes, but that's going to happen, and it will definitely be on YouTube. YouTube's probably going to be like the primary focus for me. But if you're on Facebook, you can also do that there. But make sure you like, follow, subscribe, leave a comment, say something in the comments. Here's what I'm learning: likes, follow, subscribe, comments. That's the stuff that YouTube pays attention to. And so I get a little algorithm love when you do that. So you're supporting an author when you do that. And share this with people. This is like a behind the scenes for my stuff, but it's also supposed to help authors to figure out how to handle some of what they're doing, and to tell you, this episode in particular is about telling you that you've got fewer limitations than you think, and you can reset those limitations anytime you want. I don't necessarily recommend writing a book in a single day, but aim to write a book 10% faster than you normally do, or 50% faster. You can do it. All it takes is sitting down, committing to it. And that's true of life as it is in writing. Help me out by buying some of my books. Go to kevintomlinson.com and you'll see the little books tab. You can click on that and buy anything that interests you. And I appreciate that. And then right now I have on pre-order the Templar Tunnel, which is that short story I told you about. So it's going to be a quick read, but it's also fast paced. Everyone who's read it has loved it. I think you'll like it too. So check that out. If you go to books2read.com/Templar Tunnel, it's on pre-order right now. Depending on where if you're watching this or listening to this in the future, it's probably already available. But books2read.com/Templar Tunnel. The storefronts that allow pre-orders are kind of limited, but that does include Amazon and some others. So you depending on what your preference is, that link will send you to wherever you like to buy your ebooks. So go check that out and support me on that. And if you read it, if you've already read it, which some of you may have because it was in that collection, be sure to leave a review, hopefully a positive one. In fact, I have a policy, like I've stopped leaving negative reviews on things. I used to do that. I try to burn people, but that's negative. That's no good. So my policy now is if I don't, it's the old policy your mom used to tell you. If you don't have anything good to say, don't say anything at all. So I would appreciate if you extended me that courtesy, but you're not required. You can do whatever your heart's desire is. But go ahead and leave a review if you can on any of my books, any books that you've read of mine. Reviews, especially on Amazon, reviews are very helpful. They help boost our presence in the stores and help us find new readers, which is what we do. So anyway, that is going to be it. I'm seeing more comments popping. I'm sorry. All right, real quick. It would be great to find out what Jalen has been up to. I agree. I think we can do that. Can you tell us about your new upcoming book? I've done that. Thank you. Sorry, I'm trying to do these real quick. You said you might have a sci-fi fantasy book again. Possible? Absolutely, Ray. I've always been a big fan of science fiction and fantasy, more sci-fi than fantasy. I've got ideas. I just have to, there's things on my plate I got to finish before I can dive in. But yes, that is something I'm very interested in. And Robin says, thanks, Kevin. This was super inspiring and fun to listen to. And that is the whole point. And I hope everyone comes back next time and does it again. So thank you for being a part of this show, kind of a launch into a whole new thing. And I am really excited about it and really excited about seeing what everyone's reaction is to it. God bless you all, and I'll take care of yourselves, and I'll see you all next time.